States and Iran. We're going to unpack it.
It's a question that really shapes so much of global politics, isn't it? Why, after all this time, is there still so much tension? To really get to the bottom, way back.
This is not something that just popped up overnight. We are talking about a deep-seated rivalry, one that's been built on decades of mistrust and very different interests. And to really understand it, we have to look at one single pivotal moment in history.
So, where did it all start? Well, you can pretty much trace the modern conflict back to one specific year, 1979. This was the moment that didn't just change the relationship, it fundamentally broke it and redrew all the lines.
And you can just see the divide right here. It's like a before and after picture. Before 1979, the relationship was complicated for sure, but it was fundamentally different. Then, boom, the revolution happens. And from that point forward, we see the start of the decades-long opposition we're so familiar with today.
So what exactly was this revolution? Well, it was a total game changer. It completely upended Iran's government, sweeping away a monarchy that many Iranians felt had been propped up by the US for years. This internal earthquake sent massive shockwaves outward, shattering diplomatic ties with Washington and setting the stage for the hostility we've seen ever since.
Okay, so that's the history. But what's keeping the fire going today? It really all boils down to two major ongoing points of conflict that define the modern standoff.
First up, and this is the one you've probably heard the most about, Iran's nuclear program. I mean, for years, this has been maybe the biggest source of international friction and a huge focus of U.S. foreign policy. And here's the fundamental problem. The United States and its allies look at Iran's program and see a potential path to a nuclear bomb. But Iran has always insisted that its program is purely for peaceful energy. This basic, unresolved difference is a massive driver of the conflict.
And the consequences of this standoff are very, very real. To try and stop or at least control the program, the U.S. and its partners have used crippling economic sanctions, tons of diplomatic pressure, and round after round of these super high-stakes negotiations, all trying to find some kind of solution.
But look, it's not just about the nuclear program. The second major sticking point is a classic geopolitical power struggle for influence all across the Middle East.
Think about it. Both Iran and the United States see themselves as major players in the region, right? But they often have directly opposing goals. This plays out in conflicts from Iraq to Syria to Yemen, and it leads to, you guessed it, inevitable competition and a really deep-seated mistrust on both sides. Now, with all this conflict, you might think these two countries just don't talk at all, but that's not the whole story. There is a history of dialogue here. The big question, though, is whether talking can ever truly overcome decades of tension.
Despite all the hostility, there have been these surprising moments of diplomacy. Over the years, both sides have actually made attempts to sit down at the table to try and de-escalate and maybe find a little bit of common ground.
But here's the problem. These breakthroughs have almost always been incredibly fragile. The relationship is just so volatile. You'll see an agreement, maybe a little bit of hope, and then the political winds shift in one country or the other, and poof. All that progress just evaporates, leaving all the mistrust behind.
And yet, even with all the setbacks, experts keep coming back to this one idea. For a region this on edge, talking is the only real alternative to open conflict. Diplomacy, as hard as it is still seen as the only viable path to stability.
So all of this brings us to today, and it leads to the fundamental question of what the path forward looks like. The future remains, as it has for decades now, deeply uncertain.
This is really the core of the entire standoff. The reality is a complicated, difficult relationship that's just defined by tension. But the possibility of a different future, one built on cooperation, is always out there, no matter how distant it might seem. And it all hinges on the willingness of both sides to actually choose that path.
And that leaves us with the final, central question. After everything, the revolution, the nuclear standoff, the regional rivalry, is it truly possible for cooperation to win out over more than 40 years of deep, ingrained competition? The answer to that will define the future not just for these two countries, but for the entire world.